What a weekend it was, and what a day we are ready to have. Happy Monday morning. It's time for Yahoo Sports Daily. She's Caroline Fenton. I'm Jason Fitz. We've got college football reactions galore coming. We've got MVP talk because of the weekend we had in the NFL. We've got Major League Baseball to get into. Caroline, it's a very, very busy morning. Let's start the hour like we start every hour. 3 points. What is on your mind, my friend?
Oh, it's a lovely Monday, and it is always a lovely Monday when we have football to talk about. Maybe not the loveliest of Mondays in New York, though, especially if you are a Jets fan, because on Sunday, of course, we saw a Broncos-Jets matchup at Tottenham Stadium in London, but Garrett Wilson ended up limping off the field at one point in that game. He injured his knee. He said that he did have an X-ray in London, but will continue to undergo an MRI at some point this week in order to get a second opinion and to really get an idea of how severe this knee injury could be. And Garrett Wilson spoke with the media. He said, look, it's messing with my mentals. I don't want to say anything too soon. We don't know exactly how bad it is, but he talked about how frustrated he was about this potential injury that could leave him on the sidelines for some period of time. Again, we do not know, but it didn't look great on Sunday in London. Not only is Garrett Wilson frustrated, but I'm sure Jets are frustrated themselves, because the Jets had one of the worst offensive performances that we may have ever seen in the National Football League. How in the world can a team come up with negative passing yards? That's exactly what the Jets had on Sunday against the Broncos. Negative 10 passing yards after Justin Fields got sacked 9 times for 55 yards. A brutal day offensively for the New York Jets. It's been a brutal season offensively for the New York Jets. The Jets are dead last in the National Football League in pass yards per game. The Jets are winless on this season. Garrett Wilson, the former offensive rookie of the year, may have just been one of the very few bright spots for this Jets team. One of the few reasons for optimism for this Jets fan base. So if Garrett Wilson's knee injury ends up being not very favorable, ends up leaving him on the sideline for at least some period of time this season, then what reason for optimism do Jets fans really have?
God, that's just, we're so early in the year and optimism's gone for everybody, Caroline. This is, it does not feel good.
Brutal.
Yeah,
and then you've got, Cam Scadaboo and Jackson Dart and that other team in New York that are dominating, all of the funny tweets and the viral moments and the headlines. Just salt in the wound for some of these Jets fans, Fitzy.
Yeah, in the sea of suck that is the lower portion of the NFL, the Jets might actually be the biggest whale in all the land. All right. We'll get more into some of the bad and good of the NFL weekend, but we got some college football news to get to for my first point of the day, and that's a massive firing in college football at the head coaching spot. No, I'm not talking about James Franklin yet. We'll get to that. We're talking about Trent Dilfer has been fired from UAB. Dilfer went 9-21 in 2.5 seasons, 2-4 so far this season. Remember, he was a little bit outside the box as a hire for UAB, considering he had 0 collegiate football experience as a coach in any way, shape, or form. They hired him back in November 2022. At the time, he'd been the coach at Lipscomb Academy in Nashville for 4 years after being a commentator at ESPN after his playing career. I do think it's a little bit funny. I mean, I understand every program wants the best for it, but for their AD to come out and say that they were moving on from the coach because they've made a decision, we agree that unfortunately our on-field performance has not lived up to the standard of winning we have for the program. Standard of winning might be a big statement for UAB, but they did go 7-6 before Dilfer became the head coach. So if you really look at it, 4-8, 3-9. Now this year, 2-4. Nothing's going the right direction. And this is a case of something we're going to talk about a lot over the course of Yahoo Sports Daily and a lot in our college football coverage. Do you hire the best person for the job or the best name that will get you attention for the job? Because certainly there were questions about Dilfer's qualifications from a head coaching standpoint, but never a question about the fact that UAB, at least for a flash, became relevant to people that may not know the program otherwise. Unfortunately, when you hire for relevance, if you don't get the work behind the scenes that you need, if you don't get the results that you need, you become relevant for all the wrong reasons, and that's exactly what happens to UAB and Trent Dilfer today. All right, let's get to our top point, Caroline Fenton, and that comes in the form of Sunday Night Football. We expected a statement game. We expected a juggernaut. We expected this moment between the Lions and the Chiefs that would be wild and incredible, and we watched was a wild butt whooping as Kansas City wins 30-17 in a game that I don't think was really even as close as the score. Kansas City was completely in control. I'm just going to say it. Like, if you thought that this year was the demise of the Kansas City Chiefs, we've been sitting here on the show week in and week out saying, wait, don't say it yet. Well, now the Chiefs sit at 3-3. They're about to get Rashee Rice back. It is time to just pronounce to the world the Chiefs are going back to the Super Bowl. They're the class of the AFC. Like, I don't know why we made this so complicated.
I think we were all very quick to just write off the Chiefs as dead, as broken, the dynasty's over, which I think comes from setting such an incredibly high standard like the Chiefs have set with Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes at the helm. But if you listened to the show, you would have known that that was a grave overreaction, that you would have known that we have been talking about this since week one when the Chiefs offense looked incredibly flat against the Chargers. Look, understand, Xavier Worthy is hurt, you're getting him back. Rashee Rice is suspended, you're getting him back. And this Chiefs team looks like it is finally settling in. I think that if you've been in a coma for the last month and a half, 2 months. First of all, welcome back. We're happy to have you.
Welcome back. Yeah.
Second of all, yeah, so happy you're healthy. If last night was the first football game that you watched all season long, I don't think you would have blinked twice. I think you would have thought, yep, like that's the Chiefs, same old Chiefs, because that was my biggest takeaway. That I've watched this Chiefs team the first, 6 weeks of the season. They didn't look like the Chiefs. Patrick Mahomes didn't look like Patrick Mahomes. It wasn't an explosive offense that we have grown accustomed to seeing with Patrick Mahomes. But last night we did. Last night that was a vintage Patrick Mahomes. It was precise. It wasn't overly explosive. I don't think that we saw, too many 20-plus yard pass plays from Patrick Mahomes last night, but you didn't need to. It was methodical. It was efficient. It was effective. And yes, I understand that the Detroit Lions are incredibly short-handed in the secondary, but the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes did what they needed to do in order to take advantage of a Lions secondary that's incredibly banged up. So that was vintage Chiefs. That was Patrick Mahomes. And then you add on top of the fact that the Chiefs had a great defensive performance last night, that they really kept the Lions' run game in check, that it felt like this Lions team has been the more physical team on the field for the better part of this season. But Fitz, I thought the Chiefs out-physicaled the Lions. I thought the Chiefs out-Lionsed the Lions. And that is exactly what you need to do to put together, not even just a postseason formula, which I know a lot of people were kind of questioning if this Chiefs team was a postseason team. Ridiculous. Of course they are. But that is a Super Bowl formula.
Now, there's this level of, to your point, Isaiah Pacheco, the way they ran the football last night, Kansas City, like we could talk about the banged up secondary for the Lions, but the Chiefs were more aggressive at the line of scrimmage. They moved the line of scrimmage over and over and over again. They moved the football with their running backs over and over again. And you're right. It's not necessarily huge explosive plays, but Mahomes did what Mahomes always does. Like, you thought you had him, you didn't have him. He turned around, he slipped around, and suddenly he completed a pass for a first down. That's a backbreaker. That's just part of the method of who they are. Again, they will get Rashee Rice back. And you can look at their schedule and see some big brands left on it, but at least according to one sports book, for the rest of the season, the Chiefs will be favored as of today in every single remaining game. The closest spread left is a 1.5-point game against the Bills, where they are currently favored. So yes, there are some big names left on the Chiefs schedule, but at least according to one Vegas sportsbook, they will be favored in every single one. And oh, by the way, Rashee Rice is going to come back and give you those explosive plays, which is why since week one, I've been sitting here saying, don't count him out for dead. Wait for it. This is some version of the tortoise and the hare. Everybody had a ton of time to catch a big lead over the Chiefs while they were getting through the Rashee Rice suspension, trying to figure out what their identity is going to look like. And the problem is nobody did that. The Bills have spent how long sort of playing with their food, right? And now we go into a Monday night where the pressure suddenly starts to mount just a little bit on everybody ahead of the Chiefs, because I think there's a very real chance not only are the Chiefs going to end up going to the Super Bowl, the players are going to end up going through Arrowhead. Like, who do you really trust in the AFC right now to be better than the Chiefs for any one-game sample size the rest of the season? My answer is nobody. And I know they're coming off a Monday night loss to the Jags. I can hear people yelling it. Why do you love the Chiefs so much? They're coming off Monday. Short week against the Lions, and they just did this. This is proof of concept that no matter how many times you punch the Chiefs and no matter how much you think you've rattled the Chiefs, you don't have them. Like, they're just better than everybody at the end of the day.
And to that point, yes, I understand the Jags just beat the Chiefs. I get that. But did anybody watch the Jags yesterday? Like, does anybody actually believe that the Jags would have a clearer path or a better opportunity of getting to the Super Bowl than the Kansas City Chiefs? Even before yesterday, even before last night's games. Like, did you need to see that to really feel like Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs could be Super Bowl contenders? Yes, obviously you feel a whole heck of a lot better about it after seeing the Chiefs look like the better team for the better part of 60 minutes against the team that we all thought was the best team in the NFL and the Detroit Lions. But last night, I think just continued to prove to me how silly it was that people were doubting this team. That last night, my biggest takeaway was every benefit of the doubt that I gave the Chiefs, that we all collectively as a football society have given the Chiefs this year, is a 110% earned and deserved. That the Chiefs do deserve the benefit of the doubt because they can kind of look like a very lackluster team for the better part of 3 or 4 weeks and then come out and look like that. Like that is the Chiefs that I think that we all can expect throughout the rest of the season. And you bring up Rashee Rice. They get Rashee Rice back this week. That Rashee Rice has served his suspension and he can come back. And I think it's fair to maybe expect a little bit of a ramping up period. But if we can see Patrick Mahomes in that pass game look as explosive as it did last night, I think we can afford, and the Chiefs can afford, a ramping up period for Rashee Rice. And then when everything is clicking on all cylinders for him, that the sky's the limit for this Chiefs offense. I don't think that we can overstate how impressive of a performance we saw from the Chiefs last night. And look, I do want to point out, I think it's fair to say the Lions did shoot themselves in the foot a little bit. That, the Chiefs defense doesn't get credit for holding the Lions to a field goal rather than a touchdown on that first drive because of that illegal shift penalty. That Dave Montgomery drops the ball on 4th and 2. That's less about the Chiefs defense and more about Dave Montgomery just needs to come down with that ball. Like there were some shoot yourself in the foot moments that the Lions had last night. But I don't think that takes away anything that we saw from the Chiefs offensively or defensively last night.
And that's why, look, this could still end up being a Super Bowl rematch. Like, I'm not pressing panic for the Lions yet. If you were sitting here and somebody's telling you, the Chiefs are back, by the way, then I would just tell you that you should watch shows that told you the Chiefs were never gone in the first place because the Chiefs aren't back. They never left. The same thing needs to be applied to the Lions today. Let's have some reason in all of this. The Lions lost an away game that they were down, by 10 going into the fourth quarter that, you looked at it and said, this could still go either way. The Lions made their fair share of mistakes, and they are beat up on the back end, particularly in their secondary. I don't think it's time to press panic for the Detroit Lions. I just think that this was two really good football teams, and one stepped up and the other didn't. So the Lions will learn from this, and they'll be just fine. I'm not willing to panic this year particularly because as we talk about every week, and I think is going to be the theme of this NFL season, nobody's running away with it. So even though the Lions just lost at Arrowhead and it's easy to just come in and the sky is falling and oh my God, and Kermit the Frog it, like I don't know, Caroline. Like I look at this and say the Lions still have an offense that can beat you every which way but Sunday. We know that. They have a team that I think can still, if they can figure out the back end of their defense and get healthy, they can still go on a deep run. And they're in an NFC where I'm struggling to figure out exactly who we bank on in that conference either. Like I don't think that there's necessarily a bankable team in the NFL right now that has proven itself to be without question. So, yeah, there are some questions for the Lions, but there's questions for everybody. And some of those questions, being health, I think, have the chance to answer themselves over the course of the season.
What would be your level of concern, level of nitpickery? That's a word, right?
Yeah.
For the fact that the Lions have lost to the two best teams on their schedule and have beaten up on the bad teams. Like, you can beat the Bears, you can beat the Ravens, this version of the Ravens, the Browns, the Bengals. But when the Lions have faced two who I view as legitimate contenders in the Packers and the Chiefs, they got their butts whooped.
I think there's some concern, but I also think that the very best of the very best. This didn't feel like a game that the Lions were out of. So I'm not wildly concerned. Are you wildly concerned about that?
No. I asked that not because I am wildly concerned, but just to have the conversation. Because I think that was a level of conversation that was being had amongst the football society last night. And I think that, yes, is that a glowing thing on your resume? No, of course not. Of course, in order to be a great team, in order to be a contending type of team, you have to beat the great teams and the contending type of teams. Now, the Lions haven't done that, but that's not to say that I don't think that they can. I think there are reasons to rationalize why they dropped those 2 games. One, you have a lot of attrition in week 1, and you're adjusting to 2 new coordinators in week 1 and Packers. You bounce back and have a massive statement win the weekend after that. And then last night, they have so many defensive injuries. And I know at this point in the season, no team in the NFL is 100% healthy. I get that. It's not an excuse, but it's at least an explanation.
Yeah, and I think that they may have to add to that list now. By the way, they've got the Buccaneers, the Vikings, the Commanders, the Eagles, the Giants, and the Packers for their next 6 games. So they've got a little bit of a gauntlet coming up, and they may be, we'll see, without a key player for that conversation, because for anyone that didn't see it after the game, things got chippy, very chippy, and Brian Branch, Patrick Mahomes reached out to sort of slap his hand and say, good game. Brian Branch refused that, and then went after a Chiefs player and started a little bit of a brawl. And we ended up with helmets off and some pushing and some shoving, and Brian Branch involved in the middle of something that was quite chaotic. Now, we don't know yet what the punishment will be. Certainly we'll see how this all plays out, but there is precedent. A couple of years ago, the NFL, in a very similar situation, suspended a player 2 games for a post-game altercation. This was Sunday Night Football, standalone window. Everybody's watching it. It will be interesting, Caroline, to see if the league decides that money isn't enough for this. When you go at somebody and you start a brawl after a game, there could be punishments for that. And if there are, that's pretty catastrophic for an already thin defense for the Lions.
Catastrophic. I mean, just think, use your brain. How could you do something so dumb? He did a dumb thing. Brian Branch did a dumb thing that hurt his football team last night. And let's say that the league does suspend him. Let's say the team suspends him. Like you said, there's precedent for that. Who's playing defensive back for the Detroit Lions? If it's you, me, we might get a call. Hello? Is this the Detroit Lions? Sorry, I'm busy on Sunday. Can't. Because that's where that's the position that they might be in. They are so banged up on that side of the football. And Brian Branch, just take a deep breath. Just take a step back. I get it. You're frustrated, but you just had 60 minutes to bully up on these guys, and you save it for after the game, after you lose. It was dumb. It felt like a loser thing to do. Like, if the Lions win that game, I don't think Brian Branch does that. So don't be a sore loser. Don't do dumb things to hurt your football team. That's exactly what he did last night.
Yeah, 100%. And you see the quote there. Dan Campbell said what he did was inexcusable. There is some level of this that they're going to have to figure this out. The NFL is going to make some sort of a statement. It's either going to be a massive fine, but I will remind everybody, as Mike Tirico pointed out on the broadcast, Brian Branch has been fined a lot, 7 times over the last couple of years for well over $100,000. And we know that the league has precedent for turning around and saying, can I take one very quick victory lap, Caroline Fenton? I just want to remind everybody of one thing. Everybody sat there and told me how gross ties are. Everybody sat there and told me how gross it was when the Packers ended up with the tie with the Cowboys, and everybody said ties are dumb. And when other teams in other games didn't go for ties in overtime, everybody said, yeah, nobody wants a tie. I will remind you, because of the tie between the Packers and the Cowboys, as of today, right now, the Packers are in first place in their division ahead of the Detroit Lions, because 3 wins, 1 loss, and 1 tie is better percentage points wise than 4-2. So for all y'all that sat there and said there shouldn't be ties, you should never play for the tie. Playing for a tie is a loser's mentality. I will remind you that if the playoffs started today, the Packers would win the division because of a tie. So suck it. That's my victory lap for everybody who doesn't like ties. No.
Can I take the victory lap as well?
Yeah, please do.
I picked the Chiefs to win.
Oh, God, you did. You son of a biscuit. Son of a biscuit. That was the game I needed. We ended up tied, and our picks is... I lost money and I lost this content.
Brutal weekend of picks for me, but I did pick the Chiefs to win, so I will enjoy that while I can.
Yeah, and I did not, and that means that we finished with the same record. I also lost a lot of money on that game. All right, coming up, we've got Major League Baseball. Yeah, I know. I mean, it does. We got Major League Baseball playoffs in action. We'll break down some of what the Big Dumper did last night. Coming up next, Yahoo Sports Daily. Welcome back to Yahoo Sports Daily. You see it right there. Seattle takes down Toronto 3-1 in game one of the ALCS. And Caroline Fenton, Jason Fitz. Look, I think, Caroline, there's not enough credit we can give to Seattle coming off of an extra innings, dramatic game that went the longest Game 5 elimination game in Major League Baseball playoff history. Seattle had travel issues getting out there. There were problems with their flights. Everything was delayed. They've got the body clock issue of coming off of this. Toronto had extra time. All of these different things combined into one, and it was still the Big Dumpers night to do Big Dumper things in a game that was just back and forth, 3-1 with all the drama. This felt like a significant win to me for Seattle.
Yeah, it's huge. When you bring up the 15-inning game on Friday, which celebrations, I'm sure, ensued afterward, as they should. Early morning the next morning. I mean, okay, enjoy a couple of pops. And then early morning flight, the flight issues going from Seattle to Toronto. I don't know how long of a flight that is. I can imagine it's pretty long. And crossing how many time zones that they're crossing, like, those are all things that I think we talk about that I'm sure in that locker room, they're not that worried about, because to them, it's like, look, we're playing in the ALCS. It doesn't matter what. We'll fly to Moscow on short rest and, no sleep if we have to. So, but I still think it's worth mentioning. And I still think it's worth giving a whole lot of credit to that team for, your backs are against the wall. You're probably exhausted. You've been playing a lot of baseball, a lot of emotional baseball, and you have long travel ahead of you, and you're still able to get that game one advantage on the road. I think that's the biggest thing. Getting a win on the road, getting in the win column after game one, it's a massive advantage. And being carried by that guy right there. There's a certain sense of confidence and swagger I have to believe the Mariners walk into every single game with, because they say, we have Cal Raleigh and you don't. We have one of the most exciting, if not the most exciting players in the sport right now on our team, and you don't. There are a few players more inevitable, it feels like, than Cal Raleigh is and has been all season. So now you have him and the swagger of saying, we went in Yo Trap and took over Yo Trap. I mean, that's a hell of a drug, Fitzy.
You mentioned Cal, and stick there for a second, because I think what was really interesting last night was the fact that Cal put him on the board first really felt like it gave everybody a sigh of relief, and it let everybody pitch particularly aggressively. They retired 23 of the last 24 batters, but there was such a swagger to what was happening. I think that was aided by the fact that they got early run support and just knowing that, hey, now we're pitching from a position of power in this matchup. It's interesting because we spent so much time as a collective asking ourselves, well, is it better for the Mariners to be on the road for Game 5? Would it have been better because, they've got all this pressure and where they're playing a game home, all of these different things. And, it just felt like maybe whatever that pressure was from the last series was sort of off their backs in this one because from the outset, there was sort of a comfort on the mound for Seattle. There was a comfort from the approach from Seattle. And once they got that run support from the big dumper, it felt like they really felt backs against the wall from Toronto. Toronto suddenly was the team that felt like, man, there's something in the air we got to get through tonight. I think that's a big difference here, and that's something that, look, I don't expect Seattle to just run through this series. I think this is going to be a very good series. But if you're Toronto, you got to figure out how to manage that pressure quick because you can't afford to drop the next game.
No, I mean, you drop this next game, you fall into a 2-game hole. It's hard to come back from that. It's hard to come back from that when you're all exhausted. It's hard to come back from that when you are exhausting your pitching efforts. It's hard to come back from that mentally, I think, as well, especially when you will then have to all of the travel woes that the Mariners experienced going east. Ideally, you're not experiencing mechanical plane issues like the Mariners faced, but then now you have to do. Oh, can we please, for a minute? I don't think there's any sort of plane engineer out there that's set out to sabotage Cal Raleigh and the Seattle Mariners flight. Okay. And if there was some, maniacal little plane engineer baseball Toronto Blue Jays super fan out there, then prove me wrong. I'll happy to be wrong on that one. I don't think there's any sort of, nefarious ongoing there at whatever, PJ airport they were flying out of. I digress. But that mentality of having to go back on the road, that kind of travel, going into a ballpark that I know is going to be absolutely rocking whenever they find themselves back in Seattle, that's a kind of, a mental hurdle that's kind of tough to come back from. That being said, this is absolutely very much so a series. We are 1 game into this series. The Blue Jays have proven to can be an incredibly dominant team, especially when you have a superstar in Vlad Guerrero Jr. that can do superstar things. I think, though, Fitz, blowing Kevin Gausman last night in a loss, that's tough. Not only are you climbing back from 1-0, but a guy that you feel like is incredibly reliable that has seen a whole heck of a lot of baseball, you really want to grab a win in that one, especially when you're at home.
I think the most important part of this, too, is that all of the pressure has shifted to Toronto. They got pressure now to win Game 2 so that they don't go in a 2-0 hole. Then they're going to have to go to Seattle, which is a raucous environment. What about the NLCS? Because we're getting that tonight. We're finally getting this. Game 1, we got the Brewers we'll get to in a second. But can I just philosophical statement here. And I realize that for anybody watching us for the first time, Caroline's she's a baseball fanatic, right? Like that's just part of who you are and how you're wired. I am not, and I'm the first to admit that. So I'm a casual baseball fan. I just don't know why the conversation has to be so complicated about the Dodgers. Like, I don't, for whatever reason, whether it's people want to trash the amount of money they spend or trash the fact that they always have the stars or whatever it is, like, to me, if I can see a blockbuster movie that has the biggest stars in all the land, I want to see that blockbuster movie. And what I say all the time is, as a fan of a team, what you should root for is, will my team do whatever it takes to win? The Dodgers do whatever it takes. It doesn't always work, but by God, they try. So now they're coming off a World Series championship, and now they're right back in the NLCS, and I feel like I'm seeing eye rolls everywhere where people are like, oh, God, the Dodgers. And I'm looking at it saying, the best player probably in the history of the sport ever, the best player we have ever seen do something we have never seen before on a team with the massive payroll because they care so much about winning, that's a defending World Series champion. Like, this is a golden moment. I don't get, look, the Brewers are a great story, and I love partying in Milwaukee. My favorite city in America to party in is Milwaukee. That is not an exaggeration. But by God, like, can we just appreciate the greatness of the Dodgers? Good Lord.
It's a fascinating conversation on hypocrisy that it feels like we have as sports fans. When Shohei was with the Angels, it was like, poor Shohei. He's breaking records and doing things that haven't been done since Babe Ruth did it. It would be a hilarious tweet that would come out like, Shohei Ohtani throws 6 complete innings, and hits 3 home runs in a 4-2-3 Angels loss. And it was like we all felt so bad for Shohei that it was like the greatness of him and who he is and what he represents for this game is being wasted on a truly dreadful team and a truly dreadful dreadful franchise. Excuse me, choking. All worked up about it. But now Shohei's with the Dodgers, and the Dodgers have the deepest payroll in Major League Baseball. They have all of the stars in the sport, and now we roll our eyes at it. And it is hypocrisy of, well, now Shohei's on a great team, and now we hate it because they get all the good things, and not everybody else can get all the good things. I think there's 2 conversations to be had, that we can enjoy the greatness of the Dodgers and we can enjoy the greatness of Shohei Ohtani, but still feel like it's almost quote unquote unfair that the Dodgers get all of the good things. That the Dodgers can just spend a boatload of money and build the best roster in baseball and it'll catapult them to a World Series every single year. I see both sides of it, frankly. I really do.
No.
I feel at this point, I feel like we are it is a privilege to be able to watch Shohei Ohtani play baseball and to watch Shohei Ohtani play important baseball and games that matter when every single game gets them that much closer to a World Series. But I do understand the frustrations of, oh, well, they just bought themselves another World Series.
Yeah, if that's your frustration as a fan, then find a different team or implore your team to spend that same amount of money. Because, like, they're all making it. You got to be billionaire. Like, you have to be a billionaire times billionaire times billionaire to own a Major League Baseball team. So if you can't afford the payroll, then sell the team to somebody who can. Like, it feels to me like Major League Baseball fans are that one neighbor that's sitting there and they're looking out their front window and they see the guy across the street just bought a new Ferrari. And then they see the guy across the street's upgrading their house. They're like, well, screw that guy. Why? Like, if he's got the money, let him do it. Like, if you don't have the money, that's your problem. Like, at some point, we got John Fisher out here trying to get a stadium in Vegas, or going to get a stadium in Vegas, and his family is worth how many billions of dollars? If the A's want to spend money, they can spend money. If the Brewers want to spend more money in today's climate, there isn't a bank in the world that won't give a Major League Baseball team a loan. There isn't an owner in the world that can't afford to spend more money. If you don't like that the Dodgers are outspending your favorite baseball team, stop yelling at the Dodgers and start yelling at your favorite baseball team to go out and spend more money. If the cap is so useless in any sport, and I understand Major League Baseball doesn't have that cap situation, but like, if they're going to create a world where you can spend your way to a championship, don't blame the spenders. Blame the people that don't have the you-know-whats to put their money on the line.
Well, I don't think anyone's mad at the Dodgers for spending money. I think it's a sense of envy. Spending envy. And I will say that as a St. Louis Cardinals fan, I'm born and raised in St. Louis. I love the St. Louis Cardinals. It was my first and favorite team ever since I remember falling in love with sports and ever since I can remember, period. But yeah, I mean, like, I enjoy watching the Dodgers as a baseball fan, just as a general appreciator of the Dodgers. But it does make me feel incredibly jealous. I do very much so have envy that the Dodgers invest into their team significantly more than my team does. And I think that's all where it comes from, right? It's all envy. It's all jealousy of fans of teams that don't spend, and nobody really wants to admit that, but I'll admit it. I'm jealous. I wish my team owners spent like the Dodgers did. I wish my team had talent like the Dodgers did. Of course, that's all where it stems from.
Yeah, okay. The Cardinals are owned by Bill DeWitt and some other people, but Bill DeWitt bought the team in 1995 for $150 million. According to a quick Google search, he's worth about $4 billion. The problem isn't the Dodgers spending money. If DeWitt if the Cardinals fans look at it and say, why not my team? You should be looking at DeWitt and saying, hey, go spend that money. Go spend. You got that money. Go spend that money.
That is what they're doing. Both things happen at the same time.
Yeah,
you
I
can be frustrated with your ownership.
That's fair. All right, we'll keep breaking it down. Obviously, a lot of playoff action coming, but we got MVP talk to get into. Coming up next, has it been clinched? Is it undeniable? Is Baker the MVP? We'll tell you in a minute. If I was this crowd, I'd be chanting MVP right now. Tony Romo, beyond impressed with Baker Mayfield. Maybe he's been listening to this show. It's Yahoo Sports Daily, Caroline Fenton, Jason Fitz. Is Baker Mayfield the MVP right now? And this is based on what we saw over the course of the weekend. The Bucs beat the 49ers. They improved to 5-1. They do it in a game where Emeka Buka goes down with a hamstring injury. It doesn't matter who goes down. It's like Baker Mayfield at this point could be thrown to anybody running down the sidelines. He's just a dog, and it's hitting different, Caroline. At this point, is it clear to you? Is he the MVP frontrunner?
If the season ended today, Baker Mayfield would be league MVP. Baker Mayfield should be league MVP. We've talked a lot about teams that are dealing with injuries or teams that are shorthanded. And we talked about the Lions secondary last night, and the Chiefs early in the season being without Xavier Worthy and Rashee Rice. The 49ers are the poster child for that conversation of, you're banged up, that's using that as kind of an explanation for why teams, not an excuse, but an explanation for why teams don't look how we are, accustomed to them looking. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if Chris Godwin is out. It doesn't matter if Tristan Wirfs is out. It doesn't matter if Mike Evans is dealing with a hamstring. It doesn't matter if Emeka Buka is dealing with a hamstring. It doesn't matter if Bucky Irving is out. It doesn't matter because Baker Mayfield finds a way. And I don't care how you want to define MVP because everybody has their own definition, and we're not going to do that here today. You can, however you want to define MVP, that is totally your prerogative, and that's your total justification. The 49ers, the Bucs are 5-1. They're winning games. So, if you want to say quarterback on one of the best teams in the league, that's okay. That's how you would define MVP. That would be Baker. If you want to say most clutch player in the league, that if you take this player away from your team that is a completely different team, well, that's Baker. Baker has been the difference in a win, in a loss, in every single game the Bucs have won this year. The 49ers, Mac Jones can come in and he can win a couple of games for the 49ers. I don't know if there's any backup in the league that can do and replace what Baker Mayfield means to this Buccaneers team. So I believe wholeheartedly in this Bucs team. I picked the Bucs preseason to go to the Super Bowl. I'm not shying away from that now just because they've been dealing with some injuries, because why would they? Why would I? Why would I shy away from that? If Baker's playing the way that he's been playing, if he has this clutch gene, the way that he has this clutch gene, if the entire team has taken on the persona and the swagger of that man right there of Baker Mayfield, why would I shy away from this team potentially find themselves in the Super Bowl?
I think you're right about everything you just said. Can I give one caveat, though? I fear that we are normalizing the greatness of Josh Allen. Not we, you, and I necessarily, but we as a collective society. Right now, if you look at Baker Mayfield's numbers, as impressive as they are, I would tell you that Josh Allen's are very comparable. And I understand that, it hasn't come in as dramatic a fashion. That's part of this. Like, we're watching Baker lead comeback drive after comeback drive after comeback drive. I'm looking at a Josh Allen who, let me point out one game against the Jets, 14-25. That was a 56% completion percentage, no touchdown, no picks, no rushing touchdowns. I point that out because that's the worst game of the year for Josh Allen. Every other game this season, he's had at least 70% completion. Every other game this year, he's had multiple touchdowns in the air. And also, he's got 3 touchdowns on the ground. Like, when you talk about what your team would look like without you, which I think is a part of how we judge greatness, I don't believe that the Bills are any better than the Dolphins or the Patriots or the Jets, even maybe a little better than the Jets, if they don't have Josh Allen. I think that what Josh Allen brings to the Buffalo Bills is so wildly dynamic and special. It's a little bit like watching LeBron and saying, well, LeBron can't just be the MVP every year. Yeah, I can. So while I think you're right that Baker is the MVP frontrunner, I think part of that is because it has looked so sexy throughout the course of having the big comebacks is like, oh, yeah, just everybody being captive. Even if you're watching on Red Zone, you're captivated by every moment because they're showing you these 2-minute drives over and over and over again. So it's sexy. It's got this hype to it. It's got this energy to it. There's comeback energy to it. It's all from this electric personality that screams Baker. And voters haven't been voting for Baker every single year. So it feels new. It feels fresh. But at the same time, I'm just looking at Josh Allen and I'm saying, my God, You want to talk about my team is on my back every single week. Like, I have to be Superman. It's Josh Allen. You want to talk about my offense would be nothing without me. It's Josh Allen. You want to talk about I'm only in the Super Bowl conversation because of my quarterback. It's Josh Allen. And I know it's boring.
Yeah.
I just feel like in this conversation, sometimes we normalize the greatness we've gotten used to from Josh Allen.
And me picking Baker as MVP if the season ends today doesn't mean that I don't think that Josh Allen should at least be in the conversation. Of course, he's going to be in the conversation. I think one thing that we have to recognize, whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent, humans vote on league MVP. It is people with inherent human biases. So if the season ended today and your two options for league MVP are Baker and Josh Allen, I would venture to think a lot of people would vote for Baker because Josh Allen won it last year. Like whether that's right or wrong, I think it is wrong that we should just vote on whoever the MVP is, just based on whoever the MVP is this season. But there will be some kind of thought that creeps in of like, oh, I'll vote for Baker because Josh Allen won it last year. And that's not to take away from what Baker has done. Like, Baker has absolutely point blank period by himself in a vacuum put together an MVP caliber season so far this year. But like there are inherent biases. But I would just look at 3rd and 14 yesterday. Bucs are up 20-19 in the third quarter. You're facing 3rd and 14. 49ers are swarming. Two guys that just swallow Baker up. And he just crouches, steps forward, evades the sack, and comes up with a 15-yard run. Like, to your point about the sexy, about the wow plays, the popping off the page type of plays, that's not just because it's Baker, the hot new MVP name on the block, the hot new MVP that has entered the villa. Like, that's not just, hey, Baker's, a new guy that we can talk about for this award. That is legitimate, like, wow, like MVP moments. Like, that was an MVP moment that we saw yesterday. Baker coming up with a 15-yard play on an eventual touchdown drive when it felt like he was dead in the water facing 3rd and long.
Baker will take on Josh on November 16th. So we'll get a battle of possible MVPs out of that one. And if you read Yahoo Sports content, be sure to read Jory Epstein a bunch. She is an MVP voter, so we'll see if we can get her thoughts on it throughout the course of the season. The flip side of that Bucs result was the 49ers lost, but more importantly than the loss on the field, for anyone that didn't see it, Fred Warner, gruesome injury. Fred is going to be done for the year. The 49ers, to me, are done for the year. And I know that they've been competitive, and I get it, and I appreciate the fact that they've been able to be so competitive, but I just, at some point, the injuries mount, and it's just too much. You wave the white flag, and frankly, the 49ers and injuries have become synonymous. We've talked about that, Caroline. Like, it's part of the identity of who they are as a franchise. They need to, in the offseason, look at what they're doing and see if they can figure out an answer to it. But realistically, to me, the San Francisco 49ers season is officially done. Whatever their Super Bowl aspirations are done. They just couldn't beat the injury bugs this season.
Super Bowl aspirations, I would agree. They are done. It felt like Fred Warner was kind of that last straw. That now you're down single-handedly, like hands down, your two best defensive players. Now Nick Bosa's out for the season. Fred Warner's out for the season. Credit to the 49ers, the locker room, depth, coaching, for being able to find ways to win despite all of the injuries that they've been facing and all the injuries that we've been talking about all season long. Like, that is a lot of credit to that team. It's not to say that the 49ers can't get a little bit more healthy. Brock Purdy's going to come back. Juwan Jennings is going to be more available more consistently. Christian McCaffrey, hello? We're talking about 49ers injuries. Christian McCaffrey's still been able to be available. So you can at least see paths for the 49ers to win enough games to make the playoffs. Super Bowl, though, without Nick Bosa, without Fred Warner, two future Hall of Famers, in my opinion, and you're not winning a Super. I'm not going to bet on the 49ers to even win a playoff game without those two guys and the amount of injuries that they've been facing this season. It does feel like Fred Warner was kind of that last straw for me.
They are tied for first place in their division at 4-2 with the Seahawks and the Rams. Unfortunately, it just feels like no matter where they are today, we got to remember that's 6 games. There are still 11 games left, and they got to be able to field a team every single week for 11 remaining games. That is going to be tougher and tougher and tougher. It just feels like opportunity lost for this 49ers team over the course of this season thanks to injuries. All right, one thing the 49ers have is plenty of leadership. We know that. But I'm not sure we can say the same about Miami. Tua went to the podium and called out some people. The question is, who is he calling out? We'll figure it out next.
Yeah, well, I think it starts with the leadership in helping articulate that for the guys, and then what we're expecting out of the guys, right? We're expecting this. Are we getting that? Are we not getting that? We have guys showing up to player-only meetings late, guys not showing up to player-only meetings. Like, there's a lot that goes into that. Do we have to make this mandatory? Do we not have to make this mandatory? So it's a lot of things of that nature that we got to get cleaned up, and it starts with the little things.
That's Tua Tagovailoa at the podium after the Dolphins loss, talking about leadership. Caroline Fett and Jason Fitz, Yahoo Sports Daily, and talking about player-only meetings, which is when you talk to guys that play or played in the league, when you get to player-only meeting status, you are on the brink. Like something needs to change. You're trying to change the tone of something. So, Caroline, when I hear him call out player-only meetings and then call out players not showing up or showing up late and then trying to figure out what's mandatory and what's not mandatory, it just feels to me like Tua right there is going at an entire locker room for the culture that they have and going at the leadership council of players saying, hey, we're not leading. And maybe it's not even we. Maybe it's just they. I don't know who the leadership council is among the players for the Miami Dolphins, but I think Tua just went to the podium and called all of them out, called the entire locker room out. And this is a pretty staggering statement to me.
That felt like, whenever you have, friends and a couple, and you can just tell that they're headed toward divorce or headed toward a breakup, they're fighting, they're not hanging out, they're starting sleeping in different bedrooms. It's like, eek, yikes, I don't know how much longer this is going to work out. That's exactly the same kind of feeling and vibe that I got from Tua's press conference. And you say he's calling out the locker room. Yes, in a way, but I think that's a direct reflection of the coach. That's a direct reflection of Mike McDaniel. It starts at the top. And you can say, look, these people are paid millions of dollars to play this game. They're adults. They're grown men. They get paid to show up. You have to show up. Yes, of course, that is their responsibility. But if they're not showing up, if they're not doing the bare minimum, if they're not coming on time, they're not doing the mandatory things, that shows that these grown men that make millions of dollars to do this job don't respect their leadership. Do you think anyone on those Patriots teams didn't show up for mandatory meetings when Bill Belichick was in charge? Do you think Kansas City Chiefs players aren't showing up for mandatory meetings? Of course not, because they have too much respect for their head coaches. The Patriots have too much respect for Bill Belichick. The Chiefs have too much respect for Andy Reid. That if they're not showing up, it's because they don't respect the powers that be. Tua called it out. It's leadership. Yes, it's locker room leadership, which I think is a direct reflection of Tua. The call is coming from inside the house, Tua. But I think it starts at the top as well. If you don't have respect for leadership, if you don't have respect for your head coach, then of course you're not going to show up for meetings. Of course you're going to do the bare minimum, because what's stopping you?
So
there's no accountability.
It's interesting that you mentioned Tua in that. And I think part of the roster construction failure for the Miami Dolphins, to me, is not understanding exactly who Tua is. And, I've been lucky enough to cover Tua at some capacity since his college days. And I think it's fair to say Tua is fairly quiet as an individual. And that's okay. But people ask all the time, what is it factor? Like, no matter what you do, like, that person has it. What does it mean? To me, it is authenticity and understanding exactly who you are and being exactly who you are. And people gravitate to that. You can be a quiet leader and you can be stoic. You don't have to be a rah-rah guy. You don't have to be that guy. When you are a quarterback and you are quiet, though, I do believe as a roster, you've got to insulate that with some dogs. You got to have some guys in that locker room that are truly your tone setter for accountability and for the way things are going to go. I don't know that that's naturally ever been how Tua is natured. Like, Tua in college was a much different personality than, let's say, Jackson Dart was in college, right? Like, certain guys are boisterous, certain guys are big, and certain guys walk into a locker room and they don't just clap their hands and say the right things. Everybody sort of gravitates to their leadership. You don't have to have that to be a good quarterback. I don't believe you have to have all of that to be a quarterback, but I do believe that your roster has to be constructed to work around this. So when Tua calls out leadership, I think what he's telling you is that, hey, he's not that leader, right? But also I look at it and say, it's never would have been authentic for the Tua that I've been around to be that guy. I think the Dolphins had a responsibility at some point to fill the locker room with the types of personalities that can hold those standards and are that type of person. I just don't know that that's how Tua's natured. So now he's at the podium calling out leadership, which also sort of acknowledges that he's not that leader while also acknowledging that they don't have that. Like, it's all an organizational fail.
It is shocking to me that he even said that. That feels like you're airing some dirty laundry that should not be aired in that form or fashion. I don't have any problem with a team leader. Most of the time, it's a quarterback calling out his team publicly. We need to be better. We need to be holding ourselves accountable, so on and so forth. But that's not what Tua was doing. He wasn't holding his team accountable. He was calling his team out. He was calling out, quote unquote, leadership. So if that's not him, who is it? Because when I ask you, okay, if you ask me the leader in the Chiefs locker room, okay, I think that's Travis Kelce, that's Chris Jones, that's Patrick Mahomes. Who's the leader in the Lions locker room? I think there's a laundry list of guys on that roster that could be considered leaders. Who's the leader in the Dolphins locker room? It's clearly not Tua. He's calling out leadership. He's not calling out himself. It's not the head coach. It can't be the head coach. If the head coach is your only leader in that locker room, you have roster issues. And it's clearly not Mike McDaniel. Who is it? Who is the leader? Who is the moral compass in this Miami Dolphins locker room? I'll answer that for you. They don't have one. That's why this team is such a train wreck.
That's when you talk about the bad teams in the NFL, I think you've just sort of, like, Tua has sort of stumbled on this discovery of leadership that leads you to all bad teams. Not all bad teams, but most bad teams. Like, we watched Garrett Wilson go nuts on the sideline for the Jets, and I'm asking myself, well, who's the real leader right now? Like, who is that guy? Like, who is the guy in Miami that's the leader? Who's the guy in Tennessee right now that's really a leader? Who's the guy? Like, you can go up and down. And even for some of the bad teams, like, if you want to look at the Browns and the Raiders, they've got one defensive player on both of those teams that's trying to be a leader. I don't think that one guy can do that. So maybe that's all part of the flaw. But then what do you do? Like, the Dolphins are going to play the Browns this weekend. For the loser of that game, especially if it's Miami, Like at some point, the loser of that game has to just acknowledge their season is over. But I don't know that the season's not already over for both of them. Like the Dolphins are 1-5. They had a lead with under a minute to go. And instead of taking any positive from it, it only gets worse in the post-game press conference. Like the Dolphins season is over. The Browns season is over. But for the loser of this team, of this game coming up, you got to wonder, do they have to look at it and say, do we need organizational changes? If it's the Dolphins, maybe.
Mm-hmm. If it's the Dolphins, yes. Losing to the Browns, I think, has to be the last straw. Losing to Dylan Gabriel, who's still kind of settling in, figuring out who he is as a starter in this league. The Browns are figuring out if he's a starter in this league. Like the Browns, there's just not a whole lot of good to hold on to. But at least if you're a Browns fan, you can justify it and say the season is lost because we're trying to figure out who our future quarterback is. There is value in figuring out that position. For the Dolphins, though, you lose to the Browns. What do you have to hold on to? Tua is who he is. If you want to move on from Tua, you're going to be in cap hell for the next several years. And maybe cap hell is better than being quarterbacked by Tua Tagovailoa. Like that's where the Dolphins are right now. There is no optimism that I feel like the Browns have just at least a shred of with having a young quarterback. Of having a player like Myles Garrett, having at least it feels like a little bit of direction in that franchise, in that clubhouse. But if you're the Dolphins, you don't feel optimistic about your head coach. You do not feel optimistic about your quarterback. I don't know how many pieces on that roster you really feel great about. And you lose to the Browns? Well, now you're in doo-doo land. You're already in doo-doo land. But now you're the mayor of doo-doo land.
Look, for the Dolphins, it feels like change is inevitable because it feels like there's a mutiny. Browns fans, I've talked to over a dozen people that either cover the Browns nationally or locally to try and get a sense. I can't find a single person in the entire business of covering the Browns that truly believes that's plugged in, that believes Stefanski's seat is even remotely hot. So change is not coming for the Cleveland Browns. I don't think so. They got young players that are trying to develop. I think the Browns are going to be just fine. The Dolphins, man, this just feels like this is yet another crack in the armor of whatever Miami is building. All right, speaking of coaches moving on, we had stunning news over the weekend to some. James Franklin out at Penn State. We're going to give you 4 candidates that Penn State should actually consider. We'll do it next. Penn State has fired head coach James Franklin per Pete Thamel after being ranked number 2 in the preseason AP Top 25 poll. The Nittany Lions have lost their last 3 games. That was the tweet that went out that shocked so many people yesterday as we get the news that Franklin's out. Caroline Fenton, Jason Fitz on Yahoo Sports Daily. So now the question is, where does Penn State go from here? We know that they're willing to pay the buyout. We know that they're willing to get out of James Franklin. And we know that that means that they're going to take a look at who they can bring in. So we're going to pinpoint 4 candidates that we think they should be targeting. All right, Caroline? So I'll let you go first. We're going to come up with 4 realistic targets. Like, we're not putting pie in the sky. We will justify our answers on why we think this is somebody they will look at. Give me who you got first.
We will justify our answers, and we will also then poke holes in all of our answers because, frankly, Fitz, I think every candidate out there you can make a really strong case and poke a whole lot of holes into. But I will start with, I think, the name that pops up with every single head coaching vacancy across the country, and that is Lane Kiffin. Lane Kiffin's name has been floated out there around a potential Auburn opening, a potential Florida opening. And if you're Penn State, you pick up the phone. Lane Kiffin has proven to bring a very middle of the road at best program, not just to the top of the conference, but to the top of the country. Ole Miss right now is undefeated. Ole Miss right now is a top 10 team. Ole Miss right now is a legitimate, not just playoff, but championship contender. Ole Miss was not that kind of team before Lane Kiffin came in. Ole Miss was kind of that 8-4, 7-5 kind of team, middle of the road in the SEC. Ole Miss was never that kind of program that could get the absolute top talent in the country. Lane Kiffin comes in, they get an investment into their collectives, into their NIL, and Ole Miss has one of the best rosters in the SEC. We saw it last year. They had the #1 transfer portal class in the country. So Lane Kiffin has proven to attract top talent. Lane Kiffin has proven to win some of the biggest games. They're coming off of a win over LSU, a top 5 team at that time. So I think that Lane Kiffin has proven to do it at a team with fewer resources. I do think it's a fallacy to say that Ole Miss doesn't have the money. Ole Miss has the money. Ole Miss has gotten the buy-in from their boosters and from their collectives, but it's fair to say that Ole Miss doesn't have the same level of resources that a school like Penn State might have. I have often wondered, what can Lane Kiffin do at a school with more prestige, with more resources, like a Florida, like a Penn State? I think that Penn State should at least pick up the phone. It's fair to question, would Lane Kiffin want to go to the Big Ten? You got an easier path in the Big Ten than you do in the SEC. But it's fair to ask if that's a job that he would want to take. But I think if you give Lane Kiffin more resources on a stage like Happy Valley,
they're going to have to raise up that money. I mean, according to Google, James Franklin was making $8.5 million a year.
$50 million.
Yeah, but think about it. Franklin, according to Google, was making $8.5 million. Kiffin is making $9 million right now. Kiffin is making more at Ole Miss than James Franklin was making at Penn State. So if you're going to, and Kiffin used the Alabama opening to get himself a nice hefty raise. Like, Kiffin's going to use the Penn State opening to get himself a nice hefty raise. How much money are you going to need extra above and beyond? Because you got a good thing going in Ole Miss. You got a top 5 team going to make the college football playoff this year. Well, how much extra are you going to have to make to warrant going to Penn State? And is it really a better situation? I think you're right. It's an easier path to a national to the playoffs every year. Mm-hmm. But Penn State fans are going to expect national champions. You got to be able to beat Ohio State. You got to be able to beat Michigan, and you're going to have to be in the national championship conversation. Lane was one of the first names that came to mind for me. But I sat there and thought, okay, if he didn't take the Bama job, is he going to take the Penn State job? And I don't know the answer to that. It's an interesting case. Let me make a case for one. Since you're on Lane Kiffin, let me make a case for an even crazier name that I think should get consideration, and that's John Gruden. And look, this is where I'm going to acknowledge, like, there are two sides to my head. There's my college football analyst side that's been doing this for a long time. And then there's my logic over everything and just throw everything else away and just ask yourself, what do they want? I believe the logic side of me, not the college football analyst, the logic side of me believes that Penn State wants a home run rock star hire. They want somebody that will move the press conference needle. You don't fire James Franklin right now unless you plan to bring in a name that's so huge that everybody's going to say, oh, my God. Now, there's no proof of concept that Gruden works in the college game at all. But we also know that the Nevada State Supreme Court has ruled 7-0 that his court hearing against the NFL will be heard, and he's going to take it all the way to the Supreme Court. I've had several people that are thinker in the know tell me that the NFL's offered him huge settlement dollars, and he has said no to that. He wants to clear his name. If he's suing the NFL, he's not going to get back into coaching. So now what does he do? If he can't coach at the NFL level because he's in the middle of what could be a lawsuit worth hundreds of millions of dollars, well, he can go coach in college football right now. He's got all that barstool sort of equity as everybody's fallen in love with the personality of John Gruden. He'd be a rock star. Is he a great college football coach? He doesn't know anything about college football. But look at his track record in the pros. He didn't love draft and develop. That's not how he won with the Raiders or the Buccaneers. How he won with those two teams was, I'm going to go get free agents that have played a ton of football and put them in my system so I don't have to teach them. I just have to teach them my system. In the modern college football game, he can use NIL and transfer portal to go get a bunch of kids that are 23, 24, 25, played a ton of college football, bring them in on a year-to-year basis, and just rely that can he come up with a system that outworks everybody else. I can see the math to the rock star hire, even though I know, Caroline, the argument is that, well, he's never coached any college football.
I will poke 3 holes in your argument. 1, at this point, there's a fair argument to be made that John Gruden might be a better social media personality than he is a coach. He's passionate about football. He loves football. I get it. But that doesn't make you a good coach. Number 2, I think there is going to be a college team out there that at least kicks the door in or kicks the whatever it is, knocks on the door of John Gruden. But that might be a team that is willing to be a more interesting football team than it is a competitive football team. When you hire someone like John Gruden, you will be in the headlines. I don't know if it's necessarily for the best reason. I think Penn State holds themselves to a higher standard. That's no disrespect to John Gruden, but I think Penn State holds themselves to a higher standard than the circus that will inevitably ensue if you hire a guy like John Gruden. Thirdly, and I want to be very sensitive here, Penn State and its football program has been riddled with controversy. John Gruden right now is in the middle of a controversy. Penn State, I don't know if they are in the market for inviting any more controversy in their football program than they've already dealt with over the last several decades.
I know we got to move to the next. My only push to that, because you're right. Everything you just said is right. I would just implore people to go look at the controversies around James Franklin at the end of his time as Vanderbilt and realize that did not keep James Franklin from being hired at Penn State. I don't want to get into all of it. It's too much to get into in this segment. Google James Franklin, Vanderbilt, and you'll see some of that. That's my only pushback.
That is a fair pushback, but I will offer up another name that is not nearly as sexy as Lane Kiffin or John Gruden. It is not nearly as much of a household name, but I think he's a really quality candidate that you're going to start to hear some buzz around, and that is Alex Golesh at USF. Alex Golesh took over a 1-win football team, took USF to a bowl game last year, beat Florida this year, absolutely beat the doors off of North Texas this past weekend. And I think that USF is now on a fast track to being the Group of 5 representative in the college football playoff in just year 2. Alex Golesh has done so much with not a whole heck of a lot. Same reasoning with Lane Kiffin. What can Alex Golesh do with more resources and more money and, more of a brand behind him to recruit with? The biggest reason, though, I think Alex Golesh should be in consideration for Penn State is kind of the same rationale that we use with presidential elections. I feel like every presidential election, the general American public elects the opposite of the president that we just had. That it's, okay, you had a Democrat in office, now a Republican will be, voted in, and vice versa. A Republican's in, then a Democrat will be voted in. If I'm Penn State, I'm thirsty for something different. Penn State for so long has been a boring football team to watch. Played good defense, they run the football, not very explosive in the pass game. And that's really been what's kind of been standing in the way of Penn State getting to a national championship and Penn State beating the Ohio States and the Michigans of the Big Ten on a consistent basis. Alex Golesh will bring explosiveness to your offense. Think back to 2022, that Tennessee team with Hendon Hooker and Cedric Tillman and Jalen Hyatt. They're putting up like a cajillion points and passing yards every single game. Alex Golesh was the offensive coordinator of that offense. He's brought that to USF, that air it out, high scoring, high passing, explosive offense. Can you imagine an explosive Penn State offense? Isn't that what Penn State fans want? Just something different, an exciting brand of football to watch? Because Penn State was boring and not winning championships. Maybe you might not win a national championship in the first couple of years with Alex Golesh, but you're at least going to be fun to watch.
I would love to poke a hole in your theory on Golesh. I think that he's actually, in a lot of ways, the absolute perfect hire. The absolute perfect hire. What he's accomplished where he is, and then he goes to the resources he would have at Penn State. And I think because he'd be making a jump in the eyes of many program-wise, he would get the grace of a year or two of, okay, we're building something. We got to get there. And some of these rock star names wouldn't get that same level of grace. Not to say that Golesh isn't a rock star. Caroline, I think that's a great call by you. All right, I'm going to give you one more name, and this is where everybody thinks we're going to give you Curt Cignetti, the head coach of Indiana football. I'm not going to give you that name, and we'll tell you why later in the show. If you're watching this on YouTube, find the clip. We'll find it. You'll find it later. I'll tell you why I don't think Curt Cignetti is a candidate at all for this job. I do not think he's going to be the head coach at Penn State. So when I look at people I do think would make a viable, understandable pitch, Clark Lea from Vanderbilt. We just talked about James Franklin making the leap from Vanderbilt to Penn State. And part of the reason he was able to do that is because he did the unthinkable. He made Vanderbilt competitive year in and year out. Don't blink now, but the 2024 SEC College Football Coach of the Year, Clark Lea, has Vandy as a top 15 program currently in the AP poll. He has Vandy as a team that could actually right now, this is not a misspeak, make the college football playoff. So he's turned this Vanderbilt program around to the point that now, I think they're number 17 actually, but you look at where they are in the rankings, they're a top 20 team for Vandy. And then look at how they're doing it. Clark Lea is a defensive mind. He comes from Notre Dame there where he has a ton of experience, obviously with the big program. Defense is one of the things he can quickly sort of implement in Penn State. And I know explosive offense is what puts butts in the seats. But if you got to figure out how to win quickly with the new coach, bringing in somebody that can bring in a certain attitude and certain style defensively makes a lot of sense. There are challenges to recruiting to Happy Valley. In the modern climate, there are challenges to what it means for commute, for what it means for getting recruits' families to get to all the games, for just how easy it is to get there, the time zone, the in and out, hotels around the facility. These are all things you might roll your eyes to, but they're challenges in recruiting. Well, Clark Lea has been dealing with the challenges of recruiting at Vanderbilt. That is not an easy place to get great athletes to go to, considering some of the issues that Vanderbilt has with their academics and trying to get kids in the door, right? So you look at what Clark Lea has been able to do at Vandy, which is a program that's just starting to fund itself to that level and just starting to take football truly seriously. And then ask yourself, what could he do at Penn State? Where, frankly, he can recruit at the highest possible level. I believe he can get anybody to come into Penn State. You get good kids to come to Vandy, you can get great kids to come to Penn State. He's proven he can find a quarterback in the transfer portal. He's the one that found Diego Pavia and said, hey, I want to do this. He's proven he's willing to change his offensive mindset to win more football games. He did that at Vandy. He's proving he's willing to evolve, and he's turned Vanderbilt, of all places, into a consistently good program. Vanderbilt football today, right now, this week, is considered to be a better football team than Penn State. Clark Lea did that, and he did it, I think, largely single-handedly, bootstraps. I know he's got so many connective ties to Vanderbilt, and I hope he stays at Vanderbilt forever. But I also look at the Diego Pavia experiment for Vandy and say, hey, that's going to end at the end of this year. And then he's going to have to go back into the transfer portal and find another Diego Pavia. That's difficult to do. The iron right now is incredibly hot around Clark Lea. To me, Caroline, it would make a ton of sense to strike while that iron is hot and put myself in a situation where I can go to a program where I can have sustained success and I can compete against the biggest of the best every single week. I think Penn State's a bigger job, obviously, and Clark Lea is the perfect name to come in and take it.
I think Clark Lea is a fantastic culture fit at Penn State. Because like you said, he's very, put your bootstraps on, nose to the grindstone, no nonsense, hardworking, do it the hard way, do it the right way. I have so much respect for Clark Lee. If you ever have the privilege to talk to Clark Lee or just to listen to Clark Lee, I feel like I am a wiser, smarter individual just being in Clark Lee's presence. I cannot say enough glowing things about who Clark Lee is as a developer of young men, a man himself, a person overall. But if I'm going to put myself in the shoes of a Penn State fan. Let's look at Clark Lee's history at Vanderbilt. 2020, they went 0-9 in that weird COVID season. 2-10 the next year. 5-7 the year after that. 2-10 in 2023. So we're now 4 seasons in, and Clark Lee hasn't made a bowl game. In walks Diego Pavia. Last year, they went 7-6, went to a bowl game for the first time since 2018. And then this year, obviously, they're 5-1. They're a top 20 team. There's a lot of excitement around this Vanderbilt team. When we talk about the success of Vanderbilt, just looking at Clark Lee's history, how much credit do we give Clark Lee and how much credit do we give Diego Pavia? Clark Lee gets credit for bringing in Diego Pavia, for bringing in Jerry Kill, for evaluating his team and his entire roster and saying, we need some changes around here. What we're doing isn't good enough. So let me go to New Mexico State, a team that went into Auburn and beat Hugh Freeze, and let me get their quarterback, let me get their offensive coordinator, their head coach. I give Clark Lee so much credit for that. But at the same time, going 7-6 and beating Alabama at Vanderbilt will get you a statue. Going 7-6 at Penn State will get you fired. Is what we've seen from Clark Lee enough of a sample size and good enough to justify a job at Penn State?
It's going to be an interesting. I think the Vandy defense and speed and line play deserve some credit, but I think you're very much right. That can take a quick downfall. Quick names on the honorable mention list. Brent Key, we love Georgia Tech. Obviously, we love what he's done. I like that one.
Style
Matt
fit,
Campbell.
but maybe too much of a style fit. Like maybe it's too much of the same thing.
Yeah. What about you? Have Matt Campbell on your list?
Yeah, Matt Campbell from Iowa State. I think that he is going to get a whole lot of looks for some of these job openings, whether it's Arkansas, Penn State, any jobs that might come open, Florida. I just have so much respect for Matt Campbell and what he's been able to do to make Iowa State a legitimate Big 12 contender.
Dan Mullen's undefeated at UNLV right now. We know that's a stepping stone job. Could be. What about Fran Brown? Fran Brown, Syracuse won some football games. I just don't think Fran Brown. I really like the job he's doing at Syracuse. I don't think the record or the sexiness around it is enough for Penn State fans to say, "Huzzah, we got Fran Brown!" Like I don't think he's that much of a galvanizer for the fan base.
What about Matt Rule? He went to Penn
That's
State.
The other one everybody wants.
He's from State College. Went to high school and State College. My question about Matt Rule is, what has he done at the college level? Like, yes, he brought Baylor those great years at Baylor. But like at Nebraska, like you bring in Dylan Raiola, who, was like the chosen one in Lincoln. But like, I don't think Nebraska looks like a playoff contender. Is Matt Rule done enough?
I spent a lot of time with Matt, Coach Rule at Baylor. And I think he's a great culture setter to bring, something from the bottom to the middle. And it takes him a minute to do that. He's a 3 or 4 year we reset culture guy. I don't think that's where Penn State is. All right,
he doesn't need a reset culture. We've got great culture.
That's why I don't think Rule is a good fit. He's not the only one that's not a good fit. Everybody's telling you Curt Cignetti is going to end up being the next coach at Penn State. It's a hot name. Coming up next, I'll tell you why that's just not going to happen. As much as everybody thinks that the coach is on his way out, maybe we should be talking instead about Indiana on their way to a national championship. I'll tell you about it next. Welcome back to Yahoo Sports Daily. She's Caroline Fenton. I'm Jason Fitz. 30-20 is the final score in a game that wasn't about big plays, in a game that wasn't about broken assignments, in a game that wasn't about opportunity lost for Oregon. Let's be very clear here. Indiana went to Oregon and beat Oregon on their field in a physical football game, in a blow-for-blow football game. Indiana was better. And now they're the number 3 team in the country, and they got 3 votes for number 1 overall in the AP poll. And I just keep thinking about this, Caroline. Like, you asked a really important question last week. What's the biggest win in all of college football this year? We have an answer to that now. The biggest win in all of college football just happened. Indiana beating Oregon at Oregon is by far the biggest statement win of the season. And it's the reason why right now I think we need to have that conversation of, is Indiana actually a national championship contender?
Yes, they are. That was hands down the biggest win in Indiana football history. I mean, are you kidding me? You go on the road in a top 3 team in Oregon, a conference game, and win that game? Biggest win in Indiana history. Hands down the biggest win of the season. And I think it's big for a couple of different reasons. One, it solidifies that Indiana is a national championship contender. It proves that this Indiana team is different than that team last year, is better than that team last year. Indiana last year, they made the college football playoff, but it was through kind of a rinky-dink schedule. So I think everyone just kind of wrote Indiana off as a good story, a team that was able to look good against the bad teams, but couldn't compete against the good teams because they couldn't go on the road and go toe-to-toe with Ohio State in the regular season. They couldn't go on the road at Notre Dame and win that game in the college football playoff. So it felt like a team that was, okay, it's a fun story. This changes the narrative. This win on the road, a top 3 Oregon team in a rowdy environment, college game days in town, and you beat up on Oregon the way that you did. It changes the narrative. What it also proves too is not just the fact that they got a win. Like you said, it was the process. It wasn't fluky. It wasn't weird. The ball didn't bounce Indiana's way. Indiana just beat them. If anything, Indiana shot themselves in the foot. We got a Fernando Mendoza pick 6 late in that game. Then I thought, okay, now Oregon ties it. It's 20-all in the 4th quarter. This is where the meltdown begins. This is where the better team just kind of steps forward as the better team. This is where Oregon kind of asserts their dominance. No. Fernando Mendoza throws the pick 6. It's 2020. Then Indiana goes on a 12-play, 75-yard touchdown drive that eats up over 6 minutes of clock. That was shake it off. You made a bad decision. Forget about it. Move on and put yourself in position to win this football game. And that's exactly what Indiana did. They were tougher. They were more physical. Fernando Mendoza made fewer mistakes. They completely took the run away, essentially, from Oregon. Oregon, a team that's really been solid running the football. Indiana held them to less than 3 yards a carry. 81 yards on the day. They turned Dante Moore over twice in the 4th quarter, and that was really kind of all she wrote. That first interception, I thought, okay, that game's on ice. Indiana wins this game. It wasn't weird. It wasn't fluky. Indiana just did it. And credit to Curt Cignetti. He took over the joke, the butt of every joke in the Big Ten just a couple of years ago. Now, Indiana is a top team in the country and a legitimate national championship contender.
And when you look at their remaining schedule, they're now in the position they've never been in as a team. All they have to do is take care of business. If they just win the games in front of them, which they will be heavily favored in every single one, if they win the games in front of them, they will go to the Big Ten championship game as an undefeated team, likely to take on Ohio State for the Big Ten title. Like, that is staggering. Like, win or lose that game, they are going to be a college football playoff team. If all Indiana has to do now is just win the games they should win, and they'll be in. And that's why, Caroline, what's happening everywhere today is everybody's like, oh, Cignetti to Penn State makes total sense. It makes zero sense. Curt Cignetti leaving Indiana for Penn State makes absolutely zero sense. If you look at the operating expenses for both of these football programs, they're about equal. If you look at the money being made, James Franklin, again, was being paid, depending on which source you take, somewhere between $8 and $8.5 million a year. Curt Cignetti is currently paid $8.3 million a year. And you know what? He can lose a game or two in Indiana and still go out to dinner with his family. Like, Indiana can have a season where they lose 3 games, and he's not suddenly going to get fired. Like, quality of life and quality of conversation around your family and what it means to be the coach of a team Has to matter. And if your argument is, well, it's Penn State in the modern college football climate, I don't think that matters. I don't think it matters anymore what the brand is, because you can create any brand as long as you're willing to put the money behind it. And guess what? While none of us were paying attention, money started to get spent on Indiana football. Like we've talked on this show, what happened to Vanderbilt? How did they suddenly change around? Money started to get spent. What happened at Indiana? Mark Cuban and money started to come in. Money is being spent at Indiana football. They are willing to spend money on Curt Cignetti. He's going to use this season to get a fat daddy raise, a 61-year-old coach that is deserving of a fat daddy raise. And he's going to get that big old bag, and I'm happy for him. But if you think he's going to leave Indiana to go to Penn State, I think you've lost your damn mind. There is no reason why he would ever think today Penn State is a better gig than Indiana at all. There's nothing that Penn State fans can plant their flag to and say, we have this and Indiana doesn't. That doesn't exist anymore. Welcome to modern college football, where Penn State is not as good a job as Indiana, thanks to what Curt Cignetti's already accomplished.
You're not wrong. Look, I think when we say what's a better job, we have to define what that means. Because at Indiana, if you go 10-2, you'll get a statue. At Pate, if you go 10-2, you're on the hot seat. I mean, Indiana went to the playoff last year, lost in the first game, and, obviously where they are now, you feel really great about Indiana. You've never felt better about Indiana football in your life than you feel right now. Last year, Penn State, James Franklin took Penn State to the Final Four in the college football playoff, and he's fired. So the expectations are incredibly high at Penn State. If you're not in the national championship conversation every single year, you are a failure. Those expectations are not changing anytime soon. At Indiana, if you're in the national championship conversation, hell yeah, we're just happy to be here. And that might change over time. Of course, if Curt Cignetti stays there and continues to build at Indiana. But I think there is something to be said about now a college football coach's job has never been harder right now than it ever has been. I think there is something to be said about being in a place where winning is celebrated, not tolerated. Where being in the conversation is the greatest thing that has ever happened to anyone in that fan base versus the expectation. So I think quality of life comes into play here. A couple of things, though. I mean, we cannot say that the brand of Penn State doesn't matter. Like, the brand carries weight. Being the head coach at Penn State, that matters. That means something. I don't know if that means something to Curt Cignetti, to be honest with you, because Curt Cignetti is just wired a little bit different. But it is a better brand. It does have a richer history. It does have richer tradition. Penn State just carries a certain, je ne sais quoi that Indiana doesn't. Also, we need to point out that Curt Cignetti is from Pittsburgh. He is from the state of Pennsylvania. Again, I don't know if that means anything to Curt Cignetti, but that is his history, and I think that's where it lands. But I do think right now in the NIL era, having that brand recognition doesn't carry the same weight that it used to. Because if I'm at 18 years old and I'm a 5-star and I can go anywhere in the world that I want to go, 10, 15 years ago, I'm probably going to Alabama or Ohio State because that's Alabama or Ohio State. Now, Ohio State can offer me $1 million. Indiana can offer me 1.5. I'm just going to go to Indiana because I'm getting more money there. And so it's not like Indiana doesn't have resources that Ohio State and Penn State doesn't, but it's just different. The playing field has been leveled now.
Where winning is celebrated, not tolerated, took me to church. Caroline Fenton just absolutely saying it perfectly. All right. We'll keep breaking out what happens there. I still stand by the Cignetti's not going anywhere. But speaking of revelations, winning celebrated, not tolerated, it's a revelation. We had week 6 revelations yesterday. We'll tell you about them next. Rico Dowdle is the first undrafted player since 1970 with back-to-back 200-plus scrimmage yard games. He told everybody, buckle up, taking on his old team, the Cowboys. And to his credit, he racked up 239 scrimmage yards against his former team. Carolina shocks the Cowboys 30-27. Canales' Carolina team now finds themselves very much in it. They're 3-3. We could take this time to destroy the Cowboys, and I know that's what a lot of people are doing. But instead, let's talk about revelations in a good way. All right. So there was this moment here of does Carolina deserve some love, Caroline?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, Carolina deserves some love. I mean, they're 3-3. They're right at 500. They are undefeated at home. I think we have to give the Panthers credit for what they've been able to build upon. That last year, I think we all just kind of left the Panthers for dead. I don't think anyone really expected the Panthers to do anything this season, but they were able to bow up on the run game. That's the biggest thing. Not just Rico Dowdle and what he's been able to do, 200 plus yards on the ground in back-to-back weeks, but also how that takes so much pressure off of Bryce Young. That maybe we just need to step back and acknowledge that Bryce Young is not the Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes or Baker Mayfield of the NFL, of the guy that can put the team on his back. But if you put pieces around him, if you take some of the weight off of his shoulders, which is exactly what this Panthers run game can do, he looks so much better. He can play so much freer. So do I think the Panthers are world beaters? No, I do not. Do I think that they're a playoff team? No, I don't. But I think we can at least give credit to the Panthers for finding ways to win, even if it's crazy and wild and freaky and late game ways that they're winning games. They are winning games, and those count just the same. And we're starting to see some of these pieces fit together for the Panthers to go from a truly miserable franchise to a team that's starting to figure some things out.
Yeah, and I think there's a little bit of a trust the process angle to Carolina. They're doing the quiet thing. They're just getting better every week. And that to me has some meaning. And you mentioned Bryce. Like, we don't really talk about Bryce Young this year, even though he's putting up a pretty good year. 10 touchdowns, 5 picks, I think are the numbers. So far, they're not asking a ton of him because you're right. They're running the football well, which is sort of what you want to do with the young quarterback. Anyway, anytime we can eliminate the conversation around your quarterback, it means that everything else is going pretty well. And what's staggering is that at 3-3 in the AFC, you'd be right in the thick of it, and everybody would think you're going to make the playoffs. In the NFC, a little tougher. There are several 4-2 teams, like 3-3, though they're only a game back. The whole season here is still in front of Carolina, and there's still meaningful football to be played. So I think this is a huge moment. So a revelation to actually look around and say, hey, look at Carolina. Now, let's keep the revelations going, and we'll take a look next at a revelation we got from the Seahawks. They win their 9th straight road game. That's crazy. And Michael McDonald has the Seahawks looking legit. 9 straight road wins is wild. So what was the revelation we got out of the Seahawks beating the Jags to you?
I think it's the fact that we need to be talking about Jackson Smith and Jigba in the same way that we talk about Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase and CeeDee Lamb, because that's exactly what he is and what he is for his team, the same way those guys are what they are for their teams. I mean, what we saw against Jacksonville, 8 receptions, 162 yards and a touchdown. I mean, Jackson Smith and Jigba has over 100 yards in 4 of the 6 games that he's played so far this season. And in one of those games against New Orleans, he had 96. I mean, like Jackson Smith and Jigba is so incredibly explosive. He is so fun to watch. I don't know why, frankly, Fitz, we don't talk about him as one of the best receivers in the league, because that's what he is. He is one of the best receivers in the league.
Yeah, we don't talk about him because people sleep on the Seahawks generationally. It's like, I don't know if it's
so true.
how
We
far
really
west
do.
they are. It's just the amount of time that we don't spend giving the proper love to what Seattle's building. And you're right. I think at this point, I don't like to say, I mean, the Mount Rushmore conversations and like he's the best wide receiver. That's so subjective. To me, as you know, I like to separate everything by shelves. Like if you walk into a bar and you say, I want your top shelf vodka, that can be very subjective to people. But kind of the range of what's going to be on there. To me, JSN is at this point a top shelf wide receiver. So he's on the same shelf as Justin Jefferson, on the same shelf as Jamar Chase. Like he is that dude. And also, by the way, not for nothing, if your argument on Sam Darnold is, well, it's not going to matter when he gets to the playoffs, just shut up. Like, because as you just said earlier in the last segment, at some point you have to celebrate wins instead of just expecting them. Like, let's celebrate the fact that Sam Darnold, yet again, at some point yesterday, 2 touchdowns, no picks, 295 yards. I mean, don't sleep on it right now. Sam Darnold completing 70% of his passes, 1,500 yards, 11 touchdowns, 3 picks, and a QBR of 116. Let's just acknowledge that Sam Darnold is a damn good quarterback, throwing to one of the best wide receivers in the league with a team that has a defensive-minded head coach. Been a little up and down this year, but I think Seattle is built to make a long run. Like, at this point, I think it's fair to just acknowledge that the Seahawks are a playoff team that has aspirations this year, and depending on how the rest of the season goes, with their defense particularly, if they can tighten some of that up, I think that they can put themselves in that same conversation as the elite teams in the NFC. What about the Patriots? The Patriots are 4-2. They just won their 3rd straight game. Drake May continues to play it's lights out for Drake May. So in the world of revelations, what's your revelation for New England?
I think my revelation is I'm really excited about Drake May. Like, right? I mean, is that a crazy revelation? Is that a crazy hot take? No, it's not. But I was very skeptical about this Patriots team coming into the season because I didn't really buy into Mike Vrabel that much. I didn't think that the Patriots had enough talent around Drake May. I didn't think that they were going to take this meteoric rise that so many people expected them to make. I was not optimistic. I was not nearly as optimistic as maybe the general conversation surrounding the Patriots was going into this season. Maybe the revelation is the Patriots are probably somewhere in the middle. The Patriots aren't this AFC East dark horse sleeper playoff contender that everybody was talking about them in the offseason. And they're not as bad as maybe I expected them to be. They're a good team with a quarterback that is making the right progressions, a quarterback that that Patriots fans should be really, really optimistic about. Mike Vrabel has been better in the last couple of weeks than maybe we saw at the beginning of the season with the sloppy penalties and the turnovers. But this Patriots team is similar to the Panthers, taking the right steps forward. I do not think the Patriots are a playoff team this year, but they're taking the right steps to get there at some point.
So I often say there's a difference between being a good team and a playoff team. I thought the Patriots were going to land in that six win range, but by the end of the year, we're like, yeah, the building blocks are there. I feel like what they're showing us is that the building blocks are there. They may be a lot closer to an 8-win team than I thought, and part of that's their schedule. I mean, just like we're looking at a college football world here now where who you play matters, and the next couple of weeks, they get the Titans, the Browns coming up. Over the course of the year, they still have the Jets left twice. That's 2 easy games for them. They have the Bengals before there's any chance of getting, a decent quarterback back. They have the Ravens who have imploded. Like, it actually, as much as I've sat here and said I don't think that the Patriots are going to win a lot of football games, I'm not sure the Patriots are great. I do think the Patriots have the schedule in front of them to make some noise. I watched every single snap of that game because I was sitting somewhere in Connecticut where it was on. There was no choice. It was right in front of my face. The Patriots were not great in beating the Saints. The Saints gave them a lot more grief than they wanted to, but I still think the building blocks are there, and as long as they can take advantage of just beating on the sea of suck, I think the Patriots are going to win a lot of games this year. We'll see how that plays out towards the playoffs. So one other maybe revelation for us, how we feel in a big loss, or even in a loss. Joe Flacco came out. He was better than Browning. The Bengals looked a little bit more competitive. Do we actually believe that Flacco could maybe keep the Bengals in this thing until they get their quarterback back?
Maybe. Maybe. And maybe that's the revelation. Because with Jake Browning, I thought, okay, no, this team may be on track for being the worst team in the history of the league. And now we are talking about, well, could the Bengals stay in it until Joe Burrow comes back? That's a pretty big leap, right? That's a pretty big leap to go from this team is setting the game of football back generations to I could see there maybe potentially being a path. So that's not very definitive and that is very wishy-washy on my part. But I think to go from the leap of I want to put my eyeballs out watching this offense to, okay, I'm seeing a little razzle dazzle. I'll take it. I think Bengals fans would take it. There's at least a little bit.
I'm gonna be a beacon of light. I'm gonna be a beacon of light in a dark, dark world here for Cincinnati fans because I think I've been tough on the Bengals all year for not having a better backup quarterback situation. Look, that didn't look great, but I mean, I just for what it's worth, they have the Steelers next week. They have the Steelers this week, I should say, on Thursday night, who haven't looked like world beaters, but have won a lot of games. So they have the Steelers, the Jets, the Bears, the Steelers, the Patriots, the Ravens in their next 6 games. Like, there's some winnable football. Like, if the Bengals want to save their season, the runway is there to do it. If they win some of these games, they will save their season and they will have earned the opportunity to be back in that conversation. If they don't, then they just are who we thought they were. I just think calling the season over, and this is the thing I think we're learning, Caroline, that we need to caution the whole world on. If your take is our season is done for most teams in the NFL right now, the answer is not so fast, my friend, because there's just not in the AFC particularly. There's unless you're the Jets, yeah, the Titans are done. I don't think there's enough separation right now for most of these teams to actually look at it and say, yep, we're fried. We got no chance left. Like the Bengals still have a path to get to the playoffs if they can just play 500 football until they get Joe Burrow back, if they get Joe Burrow back. I'm trying to be a beacon of light.
And I appreciate the optimism. That's at least was my takeaway, even in a loss. And maybe that's just proves like how down in the dumps Bengals fans are after watching a Jake Browning-led offense over the last couple of weeks of we lost, but we lost in a better way than we have been losing. But that it is, I think, fair to at least bring that up in AFC North that feels wildly open, significantly more open than we ever thought. I don't think the Bengals are going to win this division, but can you make enough noise in an AFC that feels very top-heavy and very open? I mean, maybe you feel better about it today than you did last week.
I can hear Steelers fans.
But if Joe Flacco is going to be the savior of your season, then that's a really scary place to be in. I'm talking myself out of this.
Yeah, we're still talking ourselves out of the Steelers, even though they won. Okay, speaking of winning, we had winning in the biggest possible way over the course of the weekend. We'll talk about that. Plus, we got a Monday night doubleheader coming up. We'll preview it. Yahoo Sports Daily. Welcome back to Yahoo Sports Daily. We got breaking news here. Rams wide receiver Puka Nacua, the NFL's leader in catches, suffered an ankle sprain that will likely cause him to miss time, per Ian Rappaport and Mike Garafolo. It would make sense for Nacua to be out next week against the Jags, remembering the Rams have a bye week to regroup and address. Jason Fitz, Caroline Fenton, Yahoo Sports Daily. And this is obviously a substantial injury. If you were watching the game, he went out with an injury early in the game after a couple of catches on 3 targets and then tried to come back in the second half, but there was nothing left there. So Puka not able to really make any impact in what was a fairly easy 17-3 win. But maybe even more importantly, now they have to look forward to a Jags game and then a bye week. So we'll see how quickly Puka Nacua can get healthy. That's going to be key for this Rams offense, which has obviously been so good and so explosive. And Puka has been absolutely a delight, much to the dismay of Rams fans in my bank account. He wasn't able to complete that football game, which absolutely impacted his fantasy numbers and some of our bank accounts. But hopefully Puka recovers as quickly as possible. We will keep you updated on that news. And Caroline Fenton, there's news in the WNBA, my friend, as the Las Vegas Aces win their 3rd WNBA championship in 4 years, 22, 23, 25, celebrating in Vegas.
A dynasty. 3rd championship in 4 years after a sweep of the Phoenix Mercury. They went back to back, and then now they are back again. So not only is this Aces team a true dynasty, and I think we can add on top of the fact that it's even more impressive that the Aces were able to find a way to get back to a championship without one key cog of their 2 previous championships in Kelsey Plum. They were able to find themselves in this position after the first half of the season. They didn't look very good. They didn't look like a very good basketball team. They were just kind of a middle of the road team. And then at one point in the season, after losing to the Lynx by 50, they turned everything around. That this Aces team, the latter half of the season, looked like the 2022 and 2023 versions of the Las Vegas Aces. So this team's a dynasty. They were able to find themselves back to a championship without one of their key players. But A'ja Wilson also cemented herself as one of the best, if not the best players in the history of the WNBA. She became the first player in W or NBA history to win MVP, Defensive Player of the Year, Finals MVP, and a scoring title in a season. The first player ever in the history of those 2 leagues to accomplish that. A'ja Wilson is one of the best players in the history of the league, and I think we've known that. But this season, what she was able to accomplish cements all of that. Becky Hammon, I think, has cemented herself as one of the best coaches in the history of the WNBA, in a league with incredibly rich history and with players and teams and coaches with a lot that they have accomplished. We are currently witnessing one of the greatest runs that we have seen in sports.
I will remind everybody that A'ja Wilson just turned 29, meaning she has a ton of basketball left. And I will remind everybody that Becky Hammon is the best coach in the WNBA currently. There's a reason she's the highest paid coach in the league. At some point, when you look at what they've got in Vegas, what they've built is a strong, deep roster with the best player in the league currently and the best coach in the league currently. And while there might be times during the season where you're right, they were definitely sleepwalking this year, it felt like all that did was awaken the dragon just in time for the playoffs. Just like we see from great teams to get some sort of championship fatigue, they know when it's time to put the foot on the gas. And that's exactly what the Aces did. And once they did it, man, Phoenix never felt like they had a chance. And there were times in this series where Phoenix really gave everything they could to try and battle back into games. And even when they did that, they just couldn't get the shots to roll. They couldn't get the key stop when they needed it the most. I thought, Caroline, having been a fan of this team and watched all of their championships, this might have been the most impressive championship series that they played. I went to the championship games in Connecticut when they took on the Sun. This version of the Aces was just better. They were better under clutch. They were better when they needed a bucket. They were better when they needed a stop. They were better when they needed to figure out ways to win. I don't know how you beat this version of the Aces. I know the WNBA's got a big offseason coming. Everybody's going to be looking in the mirror trying to figure out how to take them down. But if your answer is they're going to age out of this championship run, or your answer is they're going to have roster construction that will take them out of this or buy out of this, Mark Davis will spend whatever it takes to keep this team together. Becky Hammon will be there as long as she wants to be there as a coach. Like this Vegas Aces dynasty, and it is that, ain't going anywhere. I think it's just getting started.
And how lucky are we if we get to see that unfold? And it's the bench, it's Dana Evans, it's Jewel Lloyd. I mean, the Aces had one of the more reliable benches in this postseason in the league. And then you have two incredibly reliable stars in Jewel Lloyd and Asia Wilson. Add Chelsea Gray into that as well. There's just so much reliability on that roster, and they were able to win in different ways. I kind of viewed game one of this final series as, your bench is really kind of getting you there. The supplementary scoring really led the Aces to that win. Game two, it was all Asia Wilson and Jewel Lloyd. In game three, the difference was Aces have Asia Wilson and Phoenix didn't. That Phoenix was down double digits at halftime, and Phoenix has been so good, or was so good, the entire postseason of making those adjustments, of being able to dig themselves out of double-digit holes. But we saw it in their series against the Lynx. They did it again in game three. And how debilitating is it when Asia Wilson has the ball in her hands with 0.3 seconds left on the clock as she hits that jumper to win it? Like, they had the superstar, and you just didn't. So like you said, when you have the superstar, when you have the coaching, when you have the bench, when you have the supplementary scoring, when you have all of those pieces, how are you supposed to beat that? How are you supposed to beat the best player in the world when she has pieces like Asia Wilson had around her?
We'll see how it plays moving forward. Next season is going to be interesting to watch. We got big football action tonight, Monday Night Football doubleheader.
Yes.
We're looking at the rematch of the Fail Mary. We got the Bears, the Commanders. This Bears defense the last couple of weeks has been better. Yeah, I know. They're playing better. We see Jaden here. Jaden, he's been fine this year, but between injury and then just a little bit of, it's been fine. Like, I think this is a big moment for Washington. They're going to have to come with their A game to get this win against Chicago.
He looked great when he came back from injury last week. He looked like Jaden Daniels. Like, he looked like the Jaden Daniels that we knew and loved from last season. Frankly, this game is, to me, this is the Commanders' game to lose. You lose this game and you start to have some kind of uncomfy conversations. But if you're the Bears, it's a great opportunity, 100% for Caleb Williams, who has been kind of hot and cold, and we've seen flashes, and then we've seen throws that are like, where in the world are you going with that football? Overall fits, though, I think this is a game that the Commanders should win if Jaden Daniels does Jaden Daniels things. And if they're able to run the ball as effectively as they've been able to.
They will be able to run the ball, I think, effectively in this one. What about the other game in the Monday night matchup? The doubleheader, we get the Falcons and the Bills. And to me, Caroline, this is a big prove-it moment for the Bills. I'm tired of talking about the Bills like they're going to be fine. I'm tired of talking about the Bills like everything's going to work out. As you've mentioned, they play with their food. I'm tired of just excusing whatever this is from Buffalo. I want to see the Bills come out and kick some ass. I want to see the Bills come out and actually be the Bills we think they are, instead of just giving them the benefit of the doubt that, well, this will be a wake-up call. They'll pull it together.
100% fits. At some point, you have to start playing like the team that everybody thinks you are. And we could could look at the close game against the Saints, or a close game against the Dolphins, and say, oh, well, you got to find a way to win. Oh, well, the Bills are just kind of playing with their food. But no more of that. How many wake-up calls do you really need, Buffalo Bills? This is a game that, on paper, from how we view these two teams, this is a game where the Bills should roll. And if the Bills keep this game close in a win, frankly, that'll be concerning to me, especially if the Bills drop their second game in a row. That's incredibly concerning to me. If the Bills are one of the elite teams of the NFL, which is, I think, how we view the Bills, if Josh Allen is truly an MVP contender, which is how I think we should view Josh Allen, then this is a game that they should win, and a game that they should win handedly. No more playing with your food, no more wake-up calls. Go out there and do what you are supposed to do.
Yeah, you're out of time, too, for the wake-up call, because, while we were all sort of sitting here focused on the Bills, as we mentioned earlier, the Patriots are 4-2. The Patriots are only half a game back right now of Buffalo. And so if the concept was the Bills are going to run away with the AFC East, I don't know how good New England is. But I know that on the standings, we could wake up tomorrow and have a tie at the top of the AFC East. And, oh, by the way, as we've also talked about, the Kansas City Chiefs are 3-3. They're a game back, basically, of where it would be if the Bills lose this football game. They just don't have wiggle room right now to be the best version of Buffalo. And this is where, you got to look all the way forward for these best teams, and you got to ask yourself, what does this week mean? Well, it means everything when only one team gets a bye in the first round of the playoffs. It means everything when only one team has the opportunity for home field advantage. If you're Buffalo, it's all about making sure that everybody has to come through Buffalo. So the tighter that any of this gets in the AFC, the more you should be puckered up. The way you beat the Chiefs is make them come to Buffalo. So I think that there's just this moment where I'm expecting a spark plug. I want a fire lit under the ass of the Buffalo Bills. I want the Bills to come out and just make it look like easy and effortless for once.
I want them to look pissed off. Because what's the point of losing to the Patriots if you don't come back out the next week and look pissed off? And you're a light schedule, which is really what the Bills have. I mean, they've had the Jets, the Dolphins, the Saints. They'll have the Falcons, and they go to Carolina, which is not an easy out anymore, I guess. Then they go to the Texans. They have the Browns. They have the Jets again, obviously. Like, that's a light schedule. But your light schedule is only advantageous if you beat up on the teams that you're supposed to beat up on. It starts tonight.
Yeah, we need that pop from Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills, and I think we'll probably get it. We'll see. Tomorrow morning, we'll have all the reaction for you starting right here at 9 a.m. on Yahoo Sports Daily. For Caroline Fenton, I'm Jason Fitz. We appreciate you watching. Come back tomorrow. Hang out with us again.